300 meters below the surface of the Arabian Sea, there is no light. There is no sound beyond the groan of pressurized steel and the slow mechanical patience of a crew that has been breathing recycled air for 11 days. The water temperature is 4 degrees Celsius. The pressure at this depth is approximately 30 atmospheres, enough to collapse an unprotected human lung in under 2 seconds. Nothing survives here by accident. Everything that exists at this depth exists because someone engineered it to. The Ghadir-class submarine moved at 3 knots, running on battery power, its diesel engines silent and cold. At this speed, its acoustic signature was nearly indistinguishable from the ambient noise of the deep ocean. The distant percussion of tectonic shifts, the biological hiss of bioluminescent organisms, the low-frequency rumble of commercial shipping 17 kilometers to the northeast. The crew of 14 did not speak unnecessarily. The commander studied the navigation display. The targeting coordinate had been programmed 72 hours earlier, cross-referenced against publicly available maritime cable charts, and confirmed through signals intelligence that took years to compile. Then the sonar operator raised 2 fingers. They were directly above it. The mechanical arm extended from the hull, a custom hydraulic assembly, not standard military equipment, something fabricated in a workshop that does not appear on any procurement record. It moved through the black water with the slow deliberation of a surgical instrument. The cable was not hard to find. It rested on the seabed in a gentle arc, approximately the diameter of a garden hose, coated in layers of polyethylene and steel wire armoring, carrying inside its unremarkable exterior roughly 20 terabits of data per second. The financial transactions of 3 continents, the communications of military installations, the private messages of 300 million people. The claw engaged. There were no explosions. There was no flash of light. There was only the thin, precise whine of a diamond-tipped rotary saw spinning at 4,000 revolutions per minute, and then the sound that no one on the surface would ever hear, the sound of the 21st century being quietly switched off, layer by layer, from the bottom of the sea. Before this story continues, if you've never heard of Undersea Cable Warfare, if the mainstream press has never explained to you why a garden hose on the ocean floor is more strategically important than an aircraft carrier, then Ground Zero Stories is the channel you've been missing. Subscribe now. This is where the invisible wars get made visible. To understand what happened in the Arabian Sea, it is necessary to understand the geography of information, not the geography of nations or coastlines or shipping lanes, but the physical geography of global data itself. 97% of all intercontinental internet traffic does not travel through satellites. Satellites are slow, expensive, and low bandwidth. The real infrastructure of the connected world is approximately 3 million kilometers of fiber optic cable lying on the floors of the world's oceans, routed through choke points that mirror almost exactly the strategic choke points of naval history. The Strait of Malacca, the Suez Canal corridor, the waters off the coast of the United Arab Emirates near the port city of Fujairah. Fujairah is not famous. It does not appear in most geopolitical analyses. It has no aircraft carrier battle group permanently stationed offshore and no missile defense umbrella visible from orbit. What it has is a cable landing station where CME-5, AAE-1 and several other major trunk cables converge before continuing toward Europe and the Americas. If the internet were a human body, the junction at Fujairah would be the carotid artery, not the heart, but the vessel whose interruption produces unconsciousness within seconds. CME-5, Southeast Asia, Middle East, Western Europe, 5th iteration, is a 20,000-kilometer system connecting Singapore to France, touching 11 countries. It carries the data traffic of banking systems, government communications, and commercial internet access for hundreds of millions of users. AAE-1, Asia, Africa, Europe 1, runs a parallel corridor, 25,000 kilometers of fiber, linking Hong Kong to France via the same general routing through the Arabian Sea. Both cables share a geographical vulnerability, a stretch of open ocean southeast of Fujairah, where the seafloor topography forces the cables into a relatively compact corridor, close enough to the surface to be accessible to a vessel that knows exactly where to look. The Iranians knew exactly where to look. They had been looking for years. The Ghadir-class midget submarine is an Iranian domestically produced vessel, approximately 29 meters in length, displacing around 120 tons when submerged. Western naval analysts spent considerable time dismissing it as a coastal defense curiosity, too small for blue water operations, too limited in range and endurance to project meaningful power beyond the Persian Gulf. This assessment missed the operational concept entirely. The sonar systems of the United States Navy and its allied partners in the Fifth Fleet, headquartered in Bahrain, are extraordinarily capable against large, nuclear-powered submarines operating in open ocean. They are designed around acoustic signatures, the cavitation noise of large propellers, the mechanical hum of reactor cooling pumps, the hydrodynamic profile of a vessel displacing thousands of tons of water. Against a 29-meter diesel-electric submarine running on batteries at 3 knots in shallow to medium depth water near a busy commercial shipping lane, those systems face a fundamentally different acoustic environment. The background noise of the Arabian Sea shipping corridor is enormous. Tankers, bulk carriers, container ships, dozens of vessels at any given time, each producing a complex acoustic signature that degrades passive sonar performance across a wide frequency range. The Ghadir, at low speed on battery power, produces an acoustic output that sits inside that noise floor. It does not disappear from detection, it becomes ambiguous. In a threat environment where ambiguous contacts number in the hundreds daily, ambiguous is functionally equivalent to invisible. The diver lockout capability is the second component. The Ghadir-class is equipped with a wet chamber, a pressurized compartment that allows combat divers to exit and re-enter the submarine while submerged without the vessel needing to surface. 2 divers can lock out at operational depth, carry tools and equipment to a target, conduct their work, and return. The submarine never breaks its thermal or acoustic profile. It never rises to a depth where aerial surveillance becomes a factor. It executes and withdraws, and by the time anyone on the surface correlates the cable outage with a possible deliberate cause, the Ghadir is already 40 kilometers away and heading home. The physics of what happens to a fiber optic cable when its external layers are breached is not complicated, but it is total. A cable, like SeaMe-We5, is constructed in concentric layers. At the center are the fiber optic strands themselves, each one thinner than a human hair, carrying light pulses that encode data at speeds approaching the physical limits of glass transmission. Around the fibers is a copper power conductor, carrying the electrical current that powers the signal repeaters, spaced every 60 to 100 kilometers along the cable's length. Around the copper conductor is polyethylene insulation. Around the insulation is steel wire armoring. Around the armoring is a final sheath of high-density polyethylene. When the diamond saw breaches the outer armoring and penetrates the polyethylene insulation, it exposes the copper power conductor to seawater. Seawater is not a perfect conductor, but at the voltages carried by undersea cable power systems, typically 10 kilovolts or higher, it is conductive enough. What occurs is a shunt fault. Instead of traveling along the cable to power repeaters, the electrical current finds a path to ground through the surrounding ocean. The voltage at the point of breach collapses. Every signal repeater between the cut and the nearest landing station loses power simultaneously. The fiber optic signal, which requires those repeaters to regenerate the light pulses over intercontinental distances, dies within milliseconds. The engineers at the cable landing station in Fujairah see it as a flat line on a monitoring display. A system carrying 20 terabits per second of live traffic simply stops. The automatic rerouting protocols engage immediately, attempting to shift traffic to redundant pathways. But redundant pathways have finite capacity, and 20 terabits per second is not a load that absorbs gracefully into backup routes. Latency spikes, packet loss climbs. Systems that depend on low latency, high bandwidth connections begin to fail in cascade. In the 12 hours following the simultaneous cuts to SeaMe-We5 and AAE-1, the effects propagate outward from the Arabian Sea like pressure waves. The first casualties are the arbitrage systems of the financial markets. High-frequency trading infrastructure connecting the exchanges in London and New York with counterpart systems in Singapore and Hong Kong depends on microsecond-level timing synchronization. When cable latency increases from 20 milliseconds to 400 milliseconds, or goes dark entirely and reroutes through satellite backup, those timing relationships break. Automated systems begin triggering circuit breakers. Trading in certain currency pairs and commodities halts. Billions of dollars in pending transactions enter a state of unresolved ambiguity, sitting in queues that cannot confirm execution. The second casualties are the military command networks. The U.S. Fifth Fleet and Central Command operate classified fiber optic links through commercial cable infrastructure as a component of their high-bandwidth communications architecture. Classified military satellite systems carry the most sensitive traffic, but the volume of routine high-bandwidth data, logistics, personnel systems, intelligence databases, video teleconferencing that flows through commercial cable is substantial. When those cables go dark, the classified satellite links do not have the capacity to absorb the full load. Prioritization occurs. Some systems get bandwidth, others are throttled to the point of non-function. The effect is not blindness, it is the sudden, disorienting experience of operating through a system that is responding at a fraction of its designed speed. Coordination suffers, decision cycles lengthen, and in the hours before the cause of the outage is definitively confirmed, there is uncertainty. Was this a natural failure? A dragged anchor? A submarine landslide? Was it an accident or an act? That uncertainty is itself a strategic product. The choice of targets was not random. It was a message written in the language of network topology. CME We5 and AAE1 are primarily Western consortium infrastructure, funded, operated, and used predominantly by telecommunications carriers and governments aligned with the United States and European Union. The cables that served the Russian and Chinese data corridors, the Russia-China digital connectivity routes, the Chinese-invested peace cable running through Pakistan, were untouched. This is the doctrine of hybrid warfare rendered in its purest form. The goal is not destruction. Destruction is recoverable, and it is attributable. The goal is calibrated disruption, pressure applied with enough precision that the target understands the message while the sender retains plausible deniability. No military platform broke the surface, no missile was fired, no satellite recorded an act of war because no act of war as legally defined occurred. A cable broke. Cables break. Sometimes they are cut by anchors, sometimes by fishing trawlers, sometimes apparently by the seafloor. The asymmetry of the exchange is the point. A Ghadir-class submarine costs approximately $15 million. A single day of disrupted global financial markets produces losses measured in the tens of billions. The ratio of investment to effect is approximately 1 to 2,000. No conventional military operation in history has achieved that ratio. The aircraft carriers of the Fifth Fleet, each costing $13 billion and requiring a 5,000-person crew, sat at anchor in Bahrain and were operationally irrelevant to what had just occurred. There is a temptation to view modern civilization as a product of abstraction, of code and cloud and wireless signal, a world that has transcended the physical limitations of geography and infrastructure. This temptation is an illusion. The internet runs on glass and copper, lying on the floor of the ocean. The financial system runs on light pulses, traveling through tubes that can be cut with a saw. The command and control architecture of the most powerful military in human history depends, in part, on the integrity of cables installed by civilian contractors in international waters with no permanent armed guard. Civilization, at the level of its foundation, is physical. It is cables and pipes and power lines and roads. And in the deep water, far from any court or treaty or surveillance satellite, that foundation is vulnerable in ways that took decades to build and can be interrupted in minutes. The silent cut is not a metaphor. It is a capability, a doctrine, and a demonstrated reality. The question is not whether it will happen again. The question is what happens the day it happens everywhere at once. That question keeps analysts awake at 3 a.m. And it should keep you thinking too. If the internet went dark tomorrow, your banking, your communications, your news, your command structures, what would you do? What would any of us do? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you want to understand the wars that don't make the headlines, the ones fought in the deep water, in the electromagnetic spectrum, in the gaps between what governments admit and what actually happens, subscribe to Ground Zero Stories. This is the channel where the invisible gets named.